Okay, this is my sketchbook. I don't know how many times I've filmed this, so I hope this one works. Okay, so we've got the fact that I started my research with Japanese artists. I was particularly interested by Hoka Suai, who did the wood blocks. This one here. And basically, I love sort of the coast and the blue and the way that they designed these images, you know, from like the 1400s and up, which I find absolutely amazing. I was really interested in the geisha as well, and I found that really inspiring. I think I'll go back to that one day. This here, I was a bit, I don't know if I can get it in shot. I was a bit confused by how they did some of these processes, and I'm sure there's a lot more that I can learn if I go into it even more. Let's have a look. I researched into dyeing the fabric and the shibori techniques. And sometimes it was done with stitch and sometimes with string. And here's some of the stitch techniques that that I used. I printed out from one of the books, and there was a lot of ideas here that I could follow. I bought a organic indigo dye from Wonky Weaver. It's a South Wales company, and I wanted to keep it local. It was using the 1-2-3 method, and I got a pack that was around about £20, and within the pack there was natural indigo dye powder, calcium hydroxide, alkaline based, and a natural henna powder. It was all eco-friendly, and it also came with pH test strips. Fireman's coat here. I was really interested in the fact that with this fireman's coat, it was 3 layers of heavy fabric, and it was worn wet, which you can understand why they did that, to keep them away from harm with the fire. You often found that they were decorated with dragons, mythological heroes, and symbols of water. On this side then we got the fact that you can still buy vintage kimonos. I don't know how old they would be, but you can still get them. Now here we've got Orogata Corin. He was a painter, 1658 to 1716, and his work reminds me of Clint's work. I don't know if you can see from there, but this section here is very, very similar to one of Clint's pieces, which I absolutely adore as well, and I found that really interesting. So I don't know whether Clint went to Japan or whether he just saw this work, but he's definitely been inspired by that. And on this side then we've got Tohaku's paintings, 1539 to 1610. I absolutely love the gold in the background. It's like deep and warm and old looking. And now here we've got Tawarayoko, I can't even say it, Sotasu. He used a technique called Tarashi Ikom, which was dropping one colour into another while it was wet. I think it's sort of basically wet on wet that we know of now. And again, this beautiful, beautiful gold quality. And that he worked during the 17th century. On this side, we have Kano Itoku, 1543 to 1590. and I really love the gnarly look on the tree on the bottom image here. And then we went on to Sesshu Toyo, 1420 to 1506. He was revered rather in China as well as Japan. I'd like to make some more detailed drawings of this style, the way that he did his trees particularly. Right, next we have Hokusai. Oh, of course, Hokusai with his wood blocks. I found it interesting that during his lifetime, they weren't allowed, the Japanese, their borders were completely shut, and they weren't allowed to leave Japan at all. They'd sent away anybody that wasn't Japanese in the first place. It was completely shut off for hundreds of years. And during that time, somehow, Hokusai was inspired by the Impressionists and the Post-Impressionists. Or rather, he inspired the Post-Impressionists. And also, he was inspired himself, Hokusai, by Western artwork, which is why his work was slightly different to the other people of his time. Now, during this time of his work, he changed his name over 30 times. And I suspect it was because of this law that they didn't want Westerners in at all, or any Western influence. And to leave the country, for instance, was, well, basically you'd be killed. Yeah, you'd have the death penalty. So they were really, really strict. Right, after that, what have we got here? We've got Kitagawa Utamaru. And he used a genre called ukiyo, which is woodblock prints and paintings. So I'm guessing he did both. So I'm a bit unsure what was going on there. But anyway, he was inspired by European artists with his use of light and shade. I like the fine line and the details, and also that in contrast with the solid blocks of colour. I find that fascinating. Okay, so here I've just basically got some different sections that inspired me. I ended up not using these because obviously I used the Shibori tie-dye, but you know, I would probably use this kind of thing in the future. Some of the work that I did before that I thought I might carry over, and I didn't in the end. Here is the difference between, you know, well, basically where does Shibori come from, first of all, and it can go back to the 8th century, but it's saying also that it originated in China in the 1600s, so I'm a bit confused by that. It became popular throughout Japan in the Edo period of the 17th century, and basically it's still popular right up to modern day. The lower classes of people were banned from wearing silks and from certain colours like red. So they were left basically with really just boring old colours, and they decided to use indigo. I think it's an indigo plant, and they basically started organic dyeing then, and all the different ways of resist dyeing. You can get the difference basically with a resist is you can do a new, it says NUI Shibori, so new Shibori. It resists with wooden dowels and stitch, and it gave more of an accurate pattern, as you can see there. Then we've got the other way of doing it, which is Ita Jimi Shibori, And according to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, they say that the technique creates the most robust patterns. They used wood, they would use wood, and in modern times, plastic and clam resist to create repeated patterns of squares, triangles, and circles. Right, the squares anyway. Now, what else have we got? Some more patterns that I was interested in. This has got is it the shibori? I'm getting confused now. With the intricate patterns that are stitched on to make more pattern. Then we've got like the panels that they would put together and have them as wall hangings. This here I was really fascinated with. I just love the way that it swirls just like the sea, and without using any colour you can really tell that it's meant to be sea, and that really inspired me, and I used that sort of use of line in some of my work. Showing here some beautiful work, the shishuko, that's what it's called, shishuko, or sashiko rather, types of work to make these beautiful repeat designs, and how you can use embroidery then on top if you wanted to make the designs even more beautiful. The stitch really here is sort of, here it's shown as a mending stitch, and it's mended all the way around to make this pair of jeans last longer, and that's the sort of the boro mending idea. And then we've got here, we've got the embroidery again, and to do this I bought the proper needles, the Japanese embroidery needles, and their thread, and I found that much easier because the needles are quite different to anything we get over here, and the thread is too, and both were very interesting to use. They weren't quite as sharp as I expected them to be, but then I was trying to get through some quite tough material. And it's showing here more of the same sort of thing, and the patchworks that you can get. I'd love to get a pair of these scissors one day. This seems to be the Japanese way of cutting, and all the different things that you can make. And again, more of the same sort of thing, all the different kinds of designs that you can get. And again, more of the same. It's showing here that in the spring-summer trend of 2021, they are still using tie-dye, which is interesting because it's come and gone. Here I used a designer, or rather a teacher that had done some YouTube videos, doing some authentic ways of making a authentic kimono, but in a simple way. Her name, I'm trying to read upside down, is Billy Matsunaga, and I've put on my PowerPoint, although I've talked about it on the PowerPoint, so I'm not sure if the audio's come out on that. So anyway, I've put the YouTube video connection or link on there for you to have a look at if you want. I did decide to go with it and follow her instructions to the T as far as I could. And what I found was that she made some extra folds, Japanese folds, and one was down the back here, one was across the back, and one was across the front. Now, these are absolutely beautiful folds, but by the time I put my patches on, you couldn't see them, and no matter what way I put the patches on, unless I left those bits open to show, you wouldn't have seen them, and I didn't think it would suit on this particular one. So I wasted some time doing some folds on there, just not thinking about it. And also I found out that they don't have proper patterns for, as you would think, for kimono. The real kimono makers in Japan never have, because they are just basic shapes. They are just oblong shapes. And all you need is some measurements, sort of the yuki, for instance, from the back of the neck to the arm, or the wrist even. The length of material that you need is just the height from the feet to the top of the neck. And that's then folded over. Once you folded it over, you make a cut down the center and you go up slightly into the back. And then you have the measurement from hip to hip. Now, we realized after a while that there's a mistake in some of what she's saying when she's describing how to measure and what to do there. I don't know if it's because she's German. She speaks fluent Japanese as well and fluent English, but there's something that she's missed when she's describing that, so that went to pot for me. But it wasn't her fault as well. My piece of fabric was just too wide to start with, and I thought, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll cut it down later, but it wasn't as easy as that. And of course you have your long piece then as your collar, which I took right down to the bottom, and I made a shorter version. Here is the some interesting people who are working as top-end designers at the moment, and they are connecting or working with Japanese kimonos, but in a Scandinavian way, and minimalism, and I think they're absolutely beautiful. But they are using accessories. This is a chain here for a watch, and some other sort of buttons as accessories there. They also work with the inner part of the opening to the sleeve. You can see that the sleeve carries on further down, which isn't what I did, but I left mine completely open because it just seemed easier. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. Looking into the sleeve is something that I needed to take into account. This lady, I think, was fabulous. She's half Japanese and half Scottish, and she's used textiles from the Scottish clans, and she's weaved or used those as panels into a kimono. I think that's beautiful. So I played with the same sort of thing with some designs I found on the internet. Obviously not my designs, but I played with the idea of it. So maybe something I could look at in the future. Here are the ideas that I was coming up with for my lino prints, and some worked and some didn't, as you can see. This one I quite like the idea of. I might do this one in the future, and I like the idea of making the lines further apart as I went down, so that really I should get a, if I did this in a blue, for instance, I'd get some thicker lines down here, going up to sort of thinner lines up here, which I suppose I could do it the other way. But I think if you were to look at it after it's printed, I wanted to have some kind of depth, as if it was going away from you, and the pebbles I just wanted to leave plain. Here I tried to play with some doodles, and I tried to sort of make it look like it was going in deeper and deeper, but this one didn't really work. I tried with some other kind of doodling, and then I coloured them in. I hated them once I coloured them in, but by then it was too late. I much preferred them when they were plain. This was the one that I actually did in the end, along with the other one I did was this one as a lino cut. So I did that one, and then I did this one in two pieces. One was a solid piece, the other one was a clear piece that I did over. And my mistake was, when I was cutting into it, where these lines are, in my mind it was going to repeat like this, but of course it repeats the opposite, in as much as it was a solid colour and where the lines are was nothing. So it worked in reverse to what I was expecting. Plus, I wasn't really thinking about the fact that if I was going to do one print over another, the first print wouldn't be dry. So that was one mistake I've learnt from. And the other one was, even though it's clear, the moment you put the colour on to print, it's not clear anymore. So that was a big learning curve. Here is I printed so many of the white panels that I thought, well, I may as well use up the pages and see what happens with some Posca pens and play with those. This one's not particularly good. I use silver and gold. This is one of the actual prints on top of a printout of one of my cyanotypes. Quite like this, really. Although saying that, you can see through it as well. You can see these patches through it of the background, which spoils it for me, really. Here is the shell and pebble one. I quite like the sea, but not really keen on the white. I don't think it works. It's not solid enough, but I quite like some of these sections. I'd use those again on something, I suppose. Again, better with gold, but you can see through them. I don't know if you can see in this. Right, okay, here we've got some examples of how I did my cyanotype. I prepped paper a week or two before and some fabric. I painted the cyanotype over them and kept them in the dark and obviously dried them first. I cut out some pieces and then positioned them. It's not the same one, obviously, but I positioned these there on my fabric using the glass to cover. So some was fabric, some was paper, and I did different ones because I was going to use them as motifs. But of course the colours change, and you know, the printouts here are much lighter than the actual colour. The colour's very deep, which you'll see soon. More of the cyanotype on this side. I moved this plant slightly, which you know, by accident, but which gave quite a nice effect. Here I didn't move it, and it's just as pretty. And this one here came out like this. Obviously the cyanotype starts off green, as you know, and then gets to a bluer colour. This was more of a sort of an aquary blue or greeny blue. On this one I just tried it with some stones, and I thought, well, if it's sort of a softer edge, that might be quite nice, but it didn't really look like anything in the end. This is how I did my my Shishiko dyeing. On here I did some extra stitches. I just put dots where the stitches had been. I did mark out all my different fabrics, but I got mixed up in the end, as I usually do, and I didn't know which one was which. I used different techniques. I used a wrapping technique on this one, which came out like this, and this is my lovely horrible bucket of indigo dye. I did some dyeing at the university as well with the direct dye. I chose my colour, and although I chose a very deep colour, I didn't leave it long enough to get that deep, but I'm quite pleased with the colour, and you'll see the outcome later. Another one of my examples there. Yeah, I really like this one, the way that this came out. This was a dip dye, and I should have left this third section in longer, because you can't really see, you can only see two sections here, but there are three. I should have left it longer. Here's some examples of how I wrapped. I had the bulldog clips here. I had I had 2 pieces of plastic that I cut from some old pots from a Kerry, I think it was, that we had. So I cut those down to 2 squares and then wrapped those, maybe a bit too well, because sometimes it just didn't come out at all. But then I suppose that is the idea. This one must be the way that I did this. Although saying that, that looks a different one, so I'm not sure anymore. Not sure which ones are which, to be honest, on these. On this one, I remember I could see some stitching, which I can there as well. So I think all of these ones were stitched. Not sure how I did this. Just a softer, slinkier piece of material. But doesn't photograph, it just doesn't want to photograph at all. But it's nice in real life. Here is where I tried to do the stitching, and I tried to make some waves. No, didn't work, but it was interesting to try. Here I've got some stationery that I made some mock-ups with, which I quite liked. Here I used this as a repeat pattern, and you can see it in the kimono that I made up as a mock-up, and I had this particular mock-up that I used from the V&A. And here I used one of the images, the other images I used for the mock-ups are all from Pexels. So you can see that the print comes out, you know, if it's larger, you can see more detail. You see less detail as it's smaller, and you could get smaller and smaller. So depending on what kind of effect I'm looking for. Again, another mock-up. I really like this one. I think it looks quite ancient. This one is a mock-up of some bedding for interiors. Mock-ups of ladies' wear, which I really liked, and that one is probably my favourite. More patterns for menswear, and I used the patterns again for handbags and accessories. This one is one of the cyanotypes that you can see that I've cut it into sections and made a different kind of pattern with it. That's one block, and then one block, and then making it smaller, and then smaller still to this, and then I think it was this one I used, and then I lowered the opacity so I could see the man's shirt behind, so I could see the folds rather than a flat piece. So I was experimenting there, and even down to that colour with lowering the opacity, I'm quite pleased with it. I didn't cut it out as well as I could have, but hey-ho. One of the larger examples. Now this is an example of how different it prints in uni to how it prints at home. Yeah, you can see the difference. Here I made up a kimono mock-up using, I thought rather than a whole piece, I'd use sections to show that, you know, you don't want to have any waste if you've got things hanging about the house. And with this one I used different patterns as the sections. This is a mock-up of a swimsuit, which I thought I really, really liked. In my younger days I would have loved to have had that one. This here is the pattern that it came out from. I can go back to when I was doing the dyeing in uni, which I can't find now. Oh, there. So this is what came out from this, which is it's interesting. I just love seeing it. It's like a reveal. I love seeing them open up and seeing what happens. These are some sections from the kimono that I made up. There's some dark shadows on here for some, because there's plants and things around. I put this in as a bit of an example of some of the stitching I did, and I tried to put the stitching around most of it, although I did initially machine sew most of it down, and then I decided to stitch. So some of it I unpicked and stitched again. And I've got Maddie, my daughter, there modelling down at Bracelet Bay for me. Okay, so we've got Riso print next. And the Riso print, we played about a bit with some of my original artwork. I'm not sure. I'm in two minds about Riso print at the moment. This is how they layered up. We did it in black, we did it in orange, and we did it in green. I like the other green, but not this. I think it's a bit too dark. And I like some of the outcomes, but not all of them. More playing with Riso. Speaks for itself, really. Here is the laser cut that I did with Lloyd. I want to do a lot more at laser cut in the future. I want to do some intricate patterns. To show off the laser cut, I put some of my designs behind it, and I was quite interested in how they worked. I don't know if you can see with those ones. I can't get any closer. And with that one there. So here we go. What have I got on this page? Oh, just more Riso print. And oh yeah. I played with printing out, because I was so disappointed with we bought a new printer, and I thought it would print out far better, but the colour's still not quite right. I need to play with it, and I don't quite know how. I used all of these ones I used on an RGB, and these are quite similar, but this one is completely different, and this one's got the C in it as opposed to the others. So I really don't know. This one's wide gamut RGB. We've got WS RGB, and then we've got WSC RGB. So that came out quite sort of creamy yellowy, and there's no white. No, the white is really taken away. So I really don't know. I think this is the last page. This is a picture. I think it was this way actually. This is a picture that I did at the back, that I was playing with one night, doodling, going on circles, and putting in where I thought I was imagining stitches would be on top of a blue fabric. And I thought, well,